My name is Deanna Gerber, and I'm the recruitment coordinator here at the College of Veterinary Medicine, which essentially means that I work with pre-veterinary students wherever they're at on their journey. So this morning I was working with elementary school students and talking to them about the profession. Now I get to be with you all. And then tomorrow is our one of our preview days. So we invite our admitted and alternate students to learn a little bit more about Iowa State. So I really do run the gamut. I can chat with you all a little bit through what Iowa State has to offer, who gets in, and how you get in. But if there is an opportunity for you to maybe shout out a question in your classroom, so maybe the classroom can come off mute, or type in a question in the chat box for me, that's great. I love having students ask questions. I'd rather give you this time to kind of get your questions answered versus me droning on, although I'm pretty good at rambling too. So we can do either one, but thank you all for being here. And I'll kind of roll into, well, first, actually, what I should say is the QR code that you see on the screen here. If you want to if you want to scan that, it actually takes you to a resource kind of shared file folder that I have that has all of the things that I would bring in person with me here electronically. So feel free to scan that. I also put it in the chat for the couple of folks that are online. That is a great place. This slide deck is in there. So if you want to follow along, you're welcome to do that as well. So thanks everybody for being here. So let's talk a little bit about what Ames has, and then we'll go into who gets in and how you get in. So if you've never been to Ames, Iowa before, we're about situated in the middle of Iowa. We're about 40 minutes north of Des Moines, Iowa, which is where most students, if they're flying in and out to visit family or go to conferences, that's usually the airport that they use, is the Des Moines International Airport. We are a fairly small town. You can be in the middle of a cornfield within 15 minutes. But we have a lot to do because we do have Iowa State University here in our town. So, we've got a bunch of different, grocery stores to choose from, a mall. We get a lot of really cool events here at Iowa, or in Ames, because of Iowa State too. So lots to do if you like being outdoorsy. There's lots of bike trails and hiking around the state as well. So, or this part of the state as well. One of the kind of trivia points is that we have one of the highest concentrations of veterinarians in North America. And what kind of gives us that claim to fame is we've got obviously the veterinary school that employs a lot of veterinarians. We have a good number of clinics around. And then we also are neighbors with the United States Department of Agriculture National Animal Disease Center. So lots of veterinarians are working there as well. That also means that we get to share knowledge back and forth between the USDA and the veterinary school. And a lot of our veterinary students or undergraduate students are working out at the NADC on different research projects, along with faculty that kind of share appointments back and forth there too. So you can see kind of some pictures of our town. So you'll see our historic Main Street. That's a lot of times where our veterinary students can be found if they're not in the vet school. There's a good number of restaurants and coffee shops and things like that. You've got our medical center here, so our veterinary medical center. And then this is one of the gardens around town that's kind of cool to check out too. So I think when people think about Iowa State, a lot of times they kind of equate animal agriculture and Iowa, which is true. We do animal agriculture very well in the state, but at the vet school, we want to give you a well-rounded education and a broad education. So we do invest on our small animal side of things as well. So here you can see just a few of the rotations that you would be able to do during your fourth year, but also the different areas where you'll find some shadowing opportunities, some work opportunities throughout your 4 years of vet school as well. This blue machine here is our stereotactic radiation therapy machine. So pretty new to the college, but it's one of those things, one of those examples of us investing just as much in our small animal hospital as in our large animal hospital. So our oncology department can now offer chemotherapy, surgery, and radiation therapy to their patients. So it's kind of cool on that side. Of course, we do have a really great large animal hospital. You can see there the different rotations housed in the building. And then some of the pictures, all of those pictures were taken in our large animal veterinary hospital. But we know that for most production animal or equine veterinarians, they don't typically have a massive hospital to call home. They're going out into the field. So that's what those offsite services help our students learn. Veterinary field services is where it essentially runs as a standalone ambulatory clinic. So our students are loading up into a truck with their veterinarian, and they're out going to horse barns and different farms throughout the area. That includes our Iowa State owned teaching farms too. Swine Medicine Education Center, SMEC is what we call it, because everything has an acronym. SMEC is a way for our students to learn veterinary medicine throughout the life of a pig. And the Great Plains Veterinary Education Center is the same sort of thing, but it's with beef cattle. So if you're looking for more large animal experience, or if your goal is to be a large animal veterinarian, those are great places to kind of learn from our faculty members. If research is your thing, we have a ton of different research going on here at Iowa State. Those are just a few of the kind of areas that we're looking at. One of the cool things is we were recently named the National Institute for Antimicrobial Resistance Research and Education. So we have a ton of projects going on based on that. And what's great is our students can get involved in research. We have a paid research internship each summer that our students can participate in if they'd like to. And that pairs them with a faculty member doing a project. And that student oftentimes gets to present a poster at the end of the summer. And a lot of times they're invited on to do more research kind of during the school year on a part-time basis too. So what will you learn as a student at Iowa State? Like I kind of alluded to, you're going to learn as broadly as possible for as long as possible. So your first year, normal anatomy and physiology covers dogs and cats. Your first semester goes on to more comparative anatomy. Your second semester, where you work with a cow, a goat, a horse, and you'll do some work with a pig and a chicken. And then they do try and tie in some exotic animals too. Your second year is all about what's abnormal. Your third year, you get to learn how to fix those things through kind of our transition to clinics. A big thing in that third year is junior surgery. So that is a partnership we have with some local shelters. We bring in those animals from the shelters. We perform spades and neuters, and those animals then go back out to become adopted. They'll also do any preventative care here at Iowa State for them, for those animals as well. So that kind of helps you set the stage for those fourth year rotations. At Iowa State, you don't track until you get ready to set up those fourth year rotations. So you're going to learn everything those first 3 years. And then in that fourth year, you'll say, you know what, you're mostly interested in small animals, production animals, equine, or mixed animal. Those are our kind of 4 tracks. And those clinical rotations run from the day after finals week, your third semester, your spring semester of your third year, all the way through to graduation. So you get 4 months, so you get 12 months of clinical rotations in that fourth year. We also try and do a lot of hands-on learning. So we've got our clinical skills lab with a bunch of those different models that you see on the screen here. One of the other contributors to our hands-on learning are our clubs. We have about 42 veterinary clubs at our school, and they will do everything from emergency medicine to, bovine medicine, zoo exotic wildlife, all of that. They essentially will give you some of those good, or they'll offer wet labs and give you that good hands-on experience. They're also bringing in practitioners out in the field to give you some good information there too. So it's kind of the team of some of that hands-on is built into our curriculum, and then even more comes in through those clubs. So I'm going to pause here and see if anybody has any questions. Either online, you can put them in the chat, or if one of the rooms can come off mute if somebody's got a question. And our room moderator might have to, help out with that.
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
You guys can ask questions. There's microphones on the tables.
Oh, okay. So this is kind of random, but I saw that you have multiple pictures of alpacas, and then you also have a model specifically of an alpaca, and that's not super common. Do y'all see quite a bit of them?
We do. In this area, there are a couple of alpaca farms that we work pretty closely with. So yes, we actually do see more camelids, I think, than some other veterinary schools. But yeah, there's actually they do kind of right after your first year, they do kind of a quick animal handling elective. So you can go out, you enroll in it, and I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 weeks. But you go out and you work with all of those animals that maybe you don't have experience in. So I know that they do work with llamas and alpacas too. So
you mentioned work with exotics. Is that pretty minimal through Iowa, or can it be more like, is it not as abundant as like chicken?
Yeah, so exotics are something that we see a little bit of here in Iowa, but I know that there are other veterinary schools that have more experience. What we do is we partner with our kind of the couple of zoos that are close by, which are the Blank Park Zoo in Des Moines. So that's about 40 minutes south of Ames. And then we will send students to the Omaha Henry Dorley Zoo, which is in Omaha, Nebraska. So we can connect you with exotic and zoo kind of experiences, but there's not a ton under our roof right now. As far as exotic pets go, we are currently looking for an exotic focus primary care veterinarian so that we can beef up that kind of area. But I know that there are more places where you can get more exotic experience, and we would help you connect with that. So our goal for Iowa State is to kind of give you that good foundation and then provide connections for you to kind of build that foundation to what you want it to be.
Thank you.
We also have a question in the chat that said, how many surgeries do you leave with under your belt?
Yeah, that's a good question for our students, and I wish I knew the answer to it. I'm sorry that I don't. So I know that during that junior surgery, it's a semester long, and you have surgery once a week, and you are either the lead surgeon, the anesthetist, or an assistant essentially on those surgeries. So you would have maybe, you'd have at least that many surgeries kind of once a week throughout a semester. You can also go on, there's a shelter medicine elective that you can do in the spring semester of your third year that would give you more surgeries. So part of it is like, it kind of depends on what electives you're doing and what rotations you're doing in that fourth year too. But a good number, actually, I've heard from a lot of students who, get jobs that they really, their practice, whatever practice that they went into, really appreciated how competent our students were as surgeons. But as far as the exact number, I have no idea.
Does anyone else have any questions?
No. Go ahead.
Okay, so
Oh, you turned it off.
You turned it.
you mentioned that the students at Iowa don't start tracking it to their 4th year. What if they think they want to do something? They say, I want to go equine. And then they start to realize they don't like it as much as they thought they did. They want to switch to something else. Do they just go ahead and finish out the year and then possibly do fellowships that are more related to something else? Or do they go back and take classes to replace those ones that they did equine that they didn't necessarily like as much?
That's a great question. So I would imagine by the time a student gets to their 3rd year, they have enough kind of general experience where they can say, yeah, I think I really am going to like that equine track, or, you know what, I might want to do, you know, small animals or, you know, vice versa. I think that's really where some of the electives in the 2nd and 3rd year come in. And then the clubs really help our students kind of connect with those things that they think they want to do early, so that by their 4th year, they're like, yeah, this is my path. The other thing is that even if you track, so whenever, you know, you track as a veterinarian or as a veterinary student, when you pass that licensing exam, you can get a job in any, you know, part of the profession that you'd like. You know, there's no small animal specific licensing exam versus large animals. So if you pass, you know, pass the NAVLE, the North American Veterinary Licensing Exam, and you get your degree, you know, every species on the planet is what I always tell students, except for humans. You can't, you know, practice medicine there, obviously. But so we would hope that students would be, you know, kind of solid in their choice. If they're still unsure, a lot of times those students are going into that mixed animal track where they can really pick and choose and get a good variety. So, you know what, if a student kind of went all in equine and then decided halfway through the year that they didn't like it, they might be able to kind of switch around some of those rotations. But the reality is that they wouldn't necessarily have to do anything extra in order to go into a mixed animal practice or, you know, a small animal practice. So, but yeah, great question. I know some students will go on to like a rotating, we have a lot of people in our food animal department that are rotating interns. So they get to try out different areas of food animal medicine to figure out where their niche is after vet school too. So great question. Any other questions?
I have one, and you kind of touched on it just a minute ago. But what is the perception of your graduates going into their first job? Like, are they considered to be confident and competent, not only in that surgical aspect, but also working in the rooms and client communication?
Yeah. So I think that they are. So, you know, we hear from our students that they do feel really confident in that aspect of veterinary medicine too. So in a student's 3rd year, they're going to do some practice client interactions, and they start out kind of basic exam and they get more complex, you know, from there, to the point where they will practice delivering bad news in an, you know, obviously in an environment where they can learn from that versus on their, you know, with their first client. And then in that 4th year, those veterinary students are running every single appointment. They're the ones greeting that patient and the client. They're bringing them into the room, or they're, you know, talking with them, or examining them in the large animal hospital. Then they'll consult with their veterinarian to say, hey, here's what I think is going on. Here's what I saw, observed. That the student and the veterinarian then are going to come up with a plan, and then they'll go back into the, you know, in and talk with the client about kind of what the next steps are. So the 4th year students really get to drive those appointments because of that. Yeah, we want them to feel confident going out into that first job. So great questions. Any other questions?
Post-graduation, what is the average employment rate after graduation for Iowa?
Yeah, so it hovers right around 96 to 98%. And I would say what we typically see is for those like 2 to 4% that don't report a job 6 months after graduation, because that's when we, touch base with them and see where they're at. A lot of times it's because they're hanging around waiting for a significant other who's in a year behind in the vet school class behind them to get done with their degree so that they can find some work in the same area as that person. So typically it's not about not getting a job, it's about not looking for a job right out of vet school. Right now, most of our veterinary students are getting 2 and 3 job offers. The job market right now for veterinarians is really, really good. And yeah, I know some students who start their 4th year with a job offer in hand saying, hey, as long as you graduate past the NAVLE, you've got a job here. So yeah, it's really good.
Do you know what the NAVLE pass rate is?
Yeah, so last year it was 98%. And that's about normal. So for us at least. So
I got a question regarding the USDA. You mentioned how close y'all are to them. What percentage of students that go to Iowa would you say, not immediately, but overall, do some work for the USDA?
Ooh, I don't know. What I know is that about 1/3 of our students are picking a production animal focus, but I don't know how many go into, how many of those might go into the USDA. I have no idea. I know a few students every year do, but I couldn't tell you. I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else have questions? Chat, does anyone have questions?
Okay.
What is your percent of out-of-state students? Because most of us here are Texas residents. So looking to possibly applying to Iowa, what would that, like how many students roughly do you take?
Yep, that's great. And that actually kind of moves us kind of on to who gets in, right? So good question. Nice segue there. So we have 160 positions available every single year. 70 of those seats are for students from out of state. We also, there you can see, obviously, we admit about 60 Iowa residents, and then we have contracts with North Dakota and Nebraska. So biggest pool then is our out-of-state students. It's also our biggest pool of applicants as well. But what we do is we split each one of those, we kind of split our applications into those 4 categories there. So Iowa, North Dakota, Nebraska, and then non-residents. And then we put, so we put all of our applicants into those pools. We admit students then based on those numbers. And we also build alternate lists based on the pool that they're in. So Iowa residents have a different alternate list than out-of-state residents. That out-of-state resident alternate list is what tends to move the fastest too. So, every year it kind of shifts, but generally it stays between about 33 to 35% of our out-of-state students will be offered admission either right away or off the alternate list every single year. So it's not awful, but it definitely, as an out-of-state student, right, it's more competitive. But we can talk a little bit about what makes that makes a competitive application too. So a little bit more about our class. You can see there kind of the makeup of the class of 2025. What's interesting is you'll notice that last year we had 25 students who didn't earn their degree before they started vet school. So what we're seeing is more students, definitely the kind of majority of the students are getting that bachelor's degree, but more students are coming in after after a year or 2 of undergrad, or 2 or 3 years, I guess. They're starting vet school after 2 or 3 years of undergrad. They're applying after a year or 2 of undergrad, and then getting in. When I first started, that number was 4. Now it's 25. We have zero preference on whether you get a degree or not before you come in, or whether you have a bachelor's degree or a master's. Really, it's about your coursework, and then kind of who you are outside of the classroom too. So you can also see there our average GPAs too. That's about normal for the last few years too. Okay, let's talk about who gets in or how you get in. We'll talk about that a little bit, and then I'll kind of open it up back up for questions. But if you do have questions, please feel free to kind of interrupt. That's totally fine as well. So, you know, like I was talking about 33 to 35% of our students get in every year, but we don't just blindly admit 33% of our students. We look for that top 33 or 35%. So we look for these specific things. Essentially, you get 100 points on your app, or you have a possibility of 100 points on your application. 45 points comes from GPA. What we are looking for is our required science courses. So our science prerequisite GPA versus what you might take for, you know, other veterinary schools that aren't on our list, or what might be required in your major. So about half of your kind of academic review comes from that science prerequisite. Last year, we had a GPA cutoff of 2.80 for that science GPA. That'll be the same this year. I think we're trying to keep it pretty consistent for that 2.80, so students can kind of understand what our expectations are. Then we look at the last 45 credits of your undergraduate career. You know, usually that works out if a student is applying between their junior and senior year of undergrad, we're looking at junior year and part of sophomore year for that. We also, the other academic cutoff that we have is we look at your cumulative GPA to make sure that you have a 2.5 or higher. Written into Iowa code for some reason, so Iowa law essentially says that you have to have a 2.50 or higher to get to start graduate or professional school. So we have to make sure that you have a cumulative GPA of that. After that, after we say, okay, they have above a 2.5, we don't look at cumulative anymore. We're just focusing on those two science courses. Factored into the academic review used to be the GRE. We no longer require the GRE. We haven't for about 4 or 5 years now. So there's no requirement there. We actually will not evaluate your GRE scores, even if you put them on the application. If you're applying to, multiple vet schools and one needs the GRE. I don't know if you've, if other veterinary schools have mentioned this before, but a really good spot to kind of focus if you are just trying to figure out which vet schools you might want to apply to is a website called applytovetschool.org. That lists all the vet schools and all of their requirements. So that's a really, really good place to start as far as figuring out which requirements you need. OChem 2 is also not in our list of, is not required by Iowa State anymore. It used to be, but it's not in our list of science prerequisites. I know some students do better in that class. So they say, can I use OChem 2 for my OChem 1 score? We require OChem 1. So you have to use that score, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on which one you did better in. So 45% is academics. The next 45% is what we call a committee review, and that's essentially everything else that you tell us about. So experiences, we're looking for, we recommend about 200 hours of quality veterinary animal and or research experience. We will also evaluate experiences that you have in extracurriculars, sports, fine arts, those sorts of things, part-time jobs that you have. So even if they're not related to veterinary medicine, maybe you have a part-time job at Starbucks. That was me in college. I worked at Starbucks. Let us know about that. That will help us understand that you know about, showing up to work, that you know about teamwork, about communication skills, about customer service, all of that. So we will start evaluating experiences in high school and go, more, kind of go towards the present. So anything from high school to application day, tell us about that. We'll look at your essays. During your essay, we are really looking for what your purpose for pursuing veterinary medicine is. So think of it more as a purpose statement than a personal statement. We also look for a mature understanding of the veterinary profession. I think a lot of pre-veterinary students are getting away from, I want to be a veterinarian because I've always loved animals. That's awesome. I love animals as well, especially my dog Moose. He's my favorite animal. He's lounging behind me on the bed here. But I'm not a veterinarian. I'm not cut out to do the science that you all will have fun doing. And so let us know what is it about the medicine side of things that interests you? What is it beyond that? I've always wanted to work with animals. And I know pre-veterinary students are recognizing that it's more than I've always wanted to be a veterinarian. That's awesome. Like the person who asked about, well, what if you decide you don't want to be an equine veterinarian, right? What if you get into your first year and you decide you don't want to be a vet, so just wanting to be it since you are 6 is not maybe a good enough excuse, but why as an adult are you applying for this profession? Why are you pursuing this profession? We'll also look at, this is where your letters of recommendation come in. We require 3, along with most schools. We will read up to 6, which is the max that you can put in on the VMCAS application. And I recommend that students think about 4, at least 4. What happens every single year is we have students who request 3 letters of recommendation. Someone misses the mark, someone misses the deadline, and then they only have 2, and we count that application as incomplete. Where if you have a 4th, then you still have the required 3, even if somebody lets you down, and you can move forward in our application process. So definitely, I would encourage students to think of 4. We strongly encourage that 1 letter comes from a veterinarian. Outside of that, we have 0 preference. We want people who know you well and who can speak to your abilities. That's the biggest piece of that, of those letters of recommendation versus what their job title is or anything like that. And then in that committee review, we'll also look at an explanation statement if you've written anything in that section. The impact that COVID has had, all of that kind of stuff. We used to give points for an interview. We no longer interview our students either. So we are really looking at that application. We're also looking at the Casper test, which is a situational judgment test. I don't know if that's been on your radar or not before, but if you have questions about that, I'm happy to kind of chat through that a little bit more. But we will ask you to take that Casper test. So with that kind of goes through our application review. Questions that you've got on that?
Does anyone have questions?
Are there any sort of like tutoring, supplemental instruction, office hours that are like offered through the school for students that are struggling a little bit more?
So are you talking as far as like current students in the program or students on their way to like the help on the application?
In the program.
In the program, absolutely. So we have a tutoring program. Most of our faculty, so we have a free tutoring program, which is really nice for our students. Most of our faculty members are happy to meet with students who might be struggling. Most of them lead study sessions before big exams too. So yeah, I mean, whatever help you need, we are absolutely willing to provide. The only thing I know that they don't do is, kind of micromanage those students, right? So if your grade sort of starts looking like it's heading downhill, you know, you might have some instructors who will say something, but ultimately that's up to you to be like, hey, I need tutoring. I need to, you know, switch my study habits up. But yes, yeah, we have an Office of Academic and Student Affairs that is all about student support. So there are also accommodations too that are available for students who maybe need more time on a test and or a different kind of environment for that. So yeah, great. Yes.
And that actually leads me into my second question. What does an average workload per semester look like? Like how many credits?
Yeah, so they're usually taking between 20 to 25 credits per semester, depending on the year and how many electives a student is taking. You are required to take 4 elective classes at any point over your first 3 years. But I mean, some students are taking way more than that. Some students want to take all of the electives that they possibly can. So, and there needs to be a balance there, right? But our students are mostly in class from 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning to about 4 or 5 o'clock at night. So it looks more like a part-time job or a full-time job. Sorry. So they're in class Monday through Friday. They do get an hour lunch break, although sometimes that's when the club meetings happen. And that's sometimes when electives are offered. So you could be, you know, kind of going straight through all day long. And then students, you know, study obviously in the evenings. If students choose to work, they're probably working 10 to 12 hours a week, but 12 is probably on the high side. Most of them have a very part-time job if they have a job at all. So they do balance. Some of them, it takes them a little while to figure out what that balance is. But yeah, it definitely is. I know some students think about it as trying to take a sip of water from a fire hose. So it can be a lot all at once.
Does chat have any questions or Zoom?
I don't see any questions in the chat.
What is y'all acceptance rate?
Yeah, so acceptance rate really has to do with who you are and where you're from. So acceptance rate for out of state is about 33 to 35% of our students. Acceptance rate for in-state is more like 45 or so, almost 50% acceptance rate. So it does jump up when you get to be an in-state student. One of the things that you'll see, I think that it's usually listed on the on that apply-to-vetschool.org site, is that last year we had 1,967 applications for 160 seats. However, that takes into consideration any student who is below that, below the academic cutoff, any student, even if they didn't get on all of their letters of recommendation and all of that. So those percentages then take into consideration that, and they take into consideration students who were offered admission off of the alternate list too. So great.
What does out-of-state tuition look like for Iowa?
Somebody is really on it as far as like, do you all see my next slides or something?
Sorry.
Got out of state tuition right here. No, that's great. That's great. I like it. I like it. I do have one question kind of backing up to more student life stuff. What does a typical day look like for a student? So they are in, mostly in the mornings, they're in lecture. So you would show up at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. You would be in lectures in your kind of core courses in the morning. You'd have an hour lunch break to go home and feed your dog or take an elective or listen to a club presentation, something like that, or just, you know, decompress somewhere. And then in the afternoons are typically when your labs are. So first year students, the afternoons are anatomy lab. That ends between 4, you know, usually around 4, somewhere between 3 and 5, depending on when, what's going on that day. Most students then go home. Maybe that's when they walk their dog, or, you know, do whatever, some students then will pick up their books and study after that. Some, at home, some will come back to the vet school. There are also evening club meetings as well. So your typical day is pretty much at vet school all day long and then studying in the evening. But there is time for fun too, I promise. They have a lot of fun at vet school after their studying is done. But great. Yes, so let's talk a little bit about tuition. You can see up there, I see that nobody has run out of the classroom yet, so that's good. But really when you're looking at non-resident tuition, so that's obviously the kind of right-hand column there. So we're looking at about $56,000 per year times 4 for vet school, right? We're at about the lower third of veterinary schools as far as non-resident tuition goes. So still a fairly good deal or a low price tag, even though that's a big price tag. And then we do offer, last year we offered about $1.5 million in scholarships for students every single year. Last year, sorry. And we try and kind of match that, but we are trying to grow that as well. So last year we did 1.5. We're hoping for $2 million by the fall of 2023. That's our goal. And we're on track to make that goal as well. About $380,000 of that went to incoming first-year students. So what we do is we look at your application and your FAFSA in order to award those scholarships. There are some large scholarships that go out with your offer of admission. So those are kind of those recruitment or decision-making scholarships that might help you, think about, well, now maybe Iowa State's closer to, my home state tuition, or, the other vet school that I got admitted to, whatever. So we do offer those scholarships. Then there are some smaller scholarships that come out in May. Those probably aren't going to make the decision for you between in-state and out-of-state tuition, but they do help, absolutely. So scholarships are a really, really great thing. If you're applying this year and you're applying to Iowa State, I would try and fill out FAFSA over winter break. That will give us time to kind of see your FAFSA, see if you have a financial need, and help match those scholarships to students who have that financial need. Another really great place for scholarships is the AVMF. So it's avmf.org, which is the American Veterinary Medical Foundation. That's a great place for scholarships. Most of those are for current veterinary students, but I think that there are a few for incoming vet students too. So questions about that you've got?
I don't believe we have any questions at the moment.
Okay, great. Sounds good. So as far as becoming an Iowa resident, I know some students ask about that. You do have to be in Iowa for a year where school is not your main priority. So typically the student starting veterinary school as an out-of-state student will end veterinary school as an out-of-state student as well. There are absolutely exceptions to that. So if you think you have a special, situation, definitely reach out to our Office of the Registrar at Iowa State. They can help walk you through what all of those requirements are, but it typically takes about a year to gain residency. So I do know students who are maybe applying to Iowa State or reapplying to Iowa State that do attempt to gain that do gain residency in the state, and then that helps them out on the tuition side. And then, like we talked about for admission statistics, it also helps them, it increases their chances of getting in because they're in that less competitive in-state pool. Great. I thought I'd leave you with a few tips. So definitely, I think sometimes it's easy for pre-veterinary students to think about like all of the different hoops that they have to jump through in order to get to vet school or in order to apply. But really what vet schools are trying to do is help you build a strong foundation that you're going to pile vet school on top of and then pile your career on top of. So really what those requirements are is they're helping you build that strong foundation. So it's good to invest your energy and time into those requirements. Obviously, staying organized always helps. You can keep in touch with me, you know, about different requirements, about different questions you have about your applications. Keep in touch with your advisors. Keep in touch with the fellow pre-vet students that you know, so they can help you remember that, you know, you really are meant to be a veterinarian, and they can be good, you know, kind of cheerleaders for you in that. Every year we have a big group of students who would make wonderful veterinarians. We literally don't have enough seats in our school for those students. Some of the things that will help that student rise towards the top are volunteerism, so how you give back to your community, and leadership. So those leadership skills that you develop. The more you can tell us about those two things on your application, the kind of more those students tend to rise towards the top of that pack. And learn to ask for help. So again, whether it's me or whether it's an advisor or whoever, whether it's the tutoring center on your campus or the writing and media center, if they can help you out with those essays, or, you know, maybe it's career services that can help you interview prep, ask for help. There are so many different resources on your campus, and I promise there will be those resources at Iowa State to help you through, but it is about kind of recognizing that those are great things and asking for help in those situations. So with that, I want to say thank you. You've got my email address as the first email up there. Please don't hesitate to reach out, give me a shout, and I can answer most questions. The questions that are better for our coordinator of admissions are Kathy Keel. She's our coordinator of admissions. She does everything coursework related. So if you have a question about a course you've taken, either at your college now or maybe a previous institution, go ahead and give her a shout. She's happy to talk through those with you. So with that, I'll see if there's any last minute questions here.
I believe we don't have any questions in the room so far.
Okay, great. So I am going to put that QR code back up there for folks who maybe popped into the room in the kind of late, which is totally fine. But that gives you a link to our resources for Iowa State. So if you want to stick around, if you've got other questions, please feel free to let me know. I'm hanging out, I think, until 5 o'clock. So thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you so much for helping present.
Yeah, thank you.